When my own son told me I was too poor to sit at the same table as his future in-laws, I felt something inside me shatter. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the company his fiance's parents were so proud of, the business they'd built their entire fortune on, belonged to me. Every single share, every brick of that building. And I was about to let them find out the hard way. Before I tell you what they said about me, please tap like. It helps me keep my voice steady. If you've ever been judged for something you quietly built, please subscribe. Your support feels like the respect I was denied. And comment your name and where you're watching from. I want to remember those who stand with me. Let me take you back to the beginning, because this story doesn't start with that dinner. It starts 68 years ago, when I was born in a small town in Ohio to parents who taught me that hard work and humility were the greatest virtues. My father was a mechanic, my mother a school teacher. We didn't have much, but we had love and we had dignity. Those values shaped everything I became. I married young, at 22, to a man named Robert Chin. He was brilliant, driven, and kind. We built a life together that was simple, but full of dreams. Robert had this vision, you see. He wanted to start a manufacturing company, specializing in precision industrial parts. This was back in 1979, when I was just 23 years old and pregnant with our son, David. We scraped together every penny we had. I worked double shifts as a waitress while 7 months pregnant to help fund the initial investment. Robert worked 20-hour days in a rented garage, building prototypes, calling suppliers, pitching to potential clients. I remember bringing him dinner at midnight, watching him hunched over blueprints, his eyes red from exhaustion but burning with determination. Those were hard times, but they were good times too. When David was born, I took only 2 weeks off before I was back to work. We couldn't afford more. Robert's company, Chin Precision Industries, was just starting to gain traction, but money was still incredibly tight. I kept working at the diner, sometimes bringing baby David with me in a carrier, letting the other waitresses watch him while I served tables. Every tip, every paycheck went into the business. We lived in a tiny apartment above a laundromat. The sound of washing machines was David's lullaby. But slowly, painfully, the business grew. Robert was a genius with engineering, but he wasn't great with people or paperwork. That's where I came in. After David started school, I began helping with the business side, invoicing, client relations, contract negotiations. I taught myself accounting from library books. I learned to read legal documents. I became Robert's partner in every sense of the word. By the time David was 10, Chen Precision Industries had 15 employees and were bringing in steady contracts with automotive manufacturers. Then, in 1995, when David was 16, everything changed. Robert had a massive heart attack. He was only 43 years old. I found him collapsed in his office, surrounded by the blueprints he loved so much. He died before the ambulance arrived. I was 40 years old, a widow with a teenage son and a company that now employed 42 people who depended on their paychecks. I could have sold it. Everyone told me to sell it. Robert's lawyer, our accountant, even my own sister said I should take whatever offer came and move on. But I didn't. That company was Robert's dream. It was our life's work. And those employees were like family. So I stepped up. I became CEO of Chin Precision Industries. I learned everything I didn't already know. I took business courses at the community college at night. I networked with other manufacturers. I pushed myself harder than I ever had before. And you know what? The company thrived. By 2000, we had 70 employees, an annual revenue of $8 million. By 2010, we'd expanded to 2 facilities and our revenue hit $35 million. I made sure every employee had good health care, fair wages, and profit sharing. I treated them the way Robert would have wanted. David went to college, graduated with a business degree, and I hoped he'd join the company. It was his legacy after all. But he wanted to forge his own path, he said. He went into finance in New York City. I supported his decision. I was proud of him for being independent. I kept running Chin Precision Industries, and by 2015, we'd crossed $50 million in annual revenue. The company was valued at $2.4 million in total assets and equity. But I lived simply. I still lived in the same modest house I bought when David was in high school. I drove a 7-year-old Honda. I shopped at discount stores. It wasn't about being cheap. I just never needed much. The wealth I'd built was for security, for the employees, for David's future. I'd already set up a trust that would transfer majority ownership to him when I passed. Everything I'd built was for him. David visited maybe twice a year. He was busy with his career, he said. I understood. I sent him money when he asked, $5,000 here for an investment opportunity, $10,000 there for a short-term cash flow problem. Over the years, I'd given him probably $150,000, never expecting repayment. He was my son. That's what mothers do. Then, last year, David called me with exciting news. He'd met someone. Her name was Victoria Sterling. She came from a wealthy family. Her father ran a successful business. Her mother was involved in charity work. They were getting engaged. I was so happy for him. My boy was settling down, starting his own family. I cried tears of joy that night. Over the next few months, David talked about Victoria constantly during our brief phone calls. She went to Yale. She summered in the Hamptons. Her family had a house in Aspen. Her father's company was very prestigious. I noticed he never quite said what the company did, but I was just thrilled he was happy. He sounded more animated than he had in years. Then came the call that started everything unraveling. It was a Tuesday evening, around 7 o'clock. I was in my kitchen, making myself a simple dinner, just chicken and vegetables, when my phone rang. "Mom, hi," David said, and I could hear tension in his voice immediately. "Sweetheart, is everything okay?" I asked, setting down my knife. Yeah, everything's fine. Listen, I need to talk to you about something. Victoria's parents want to meet you. They're planning an engagement dinner next month." My heart swelled. "Oh, David, that's wonderful. I'd love to meet them. Just tell me when and where." There was a long pause. Too long. "That's a thing, Mom. I need to talk to you about expectations." Expectations? I frowned, confused. Yeah, so Victoria's family is, they're very particular about certain things. Appearances matter to them. Social standing matters. And I just want to make sure that... Make sure what, honey? Look, I know you live simply, and that's fine. That's your choice. But the Sterlings, they're going to be judging. They're going to be evaluating. And I need you to present yourself a certain way. Something cold crept into my stomach. What do you mean, present myself? I mean, don't talk about working at a diner. Don't mention the old apartment above the laundromat. Maybe get a nice dress, something current. Do something with your hair. And maybe, I don't know, could you rent a nicer car for the evening? The Honda is just what, David? My voice was quiet, dangerously quiet. It's just not the image we need to project, okay? Victoria's father is meeting your family for the first time, and first impressions matter. These people run in certain circles, Mom. They have standards. Standards? I repeated slowly. Yes, standards. Look, I'm not trying to be harsh, but you have to understand what's at stake here. Victoria's father knows everyone in the business world. The connections alone could set up my career for life.
I can't have him thinking I come from where, David? Finish that sentence. From poverty, okay? I can't have him thinking I grew up poor or that my family doesn't have class. Victoria already thinks I'm from a modest background, which is fine, but there's modest and then there's, look, can you just work with me here? I stood in my kitchen, holding my phone, feeling like I'd been slapped. This was my son. The boy I'd worked double shifts for. The boy I'd sacrificed everything for. And he was ashamed of me. I'll think about it, I said quietly. Mom, don't be like that. I'm just trying to... I said I'll think about it. I have to go, David. I hung up before he could say anything else. I sat down at my kitchen table and just stared at the wall for an hour. The chicken burned in the pan. I didn't care. I kept replaying his words. From poverty. Standards. The Honda is just... He was ashamed of me. After everything I'd done, everything I'd built, everything I'd sacrificed, my own son was ashamed of who I was. But I didn't say anything. I didn't fight back. Because that's what I'd always done. I had swallowed my hurt. I had accommodated. I'd made myself smaller to make others comfortable. So when David called back 3 days later to apologize, a half-hearted obligatory apology, I accepted it. I told him I'd dress nicely for the dinner. I'd make a good impression. Thanks, Mom, he said, relief obvious in his voice. I knew you'd understand. Oh, and one more thing. Maybe don't mention what you do for work. If they ask, just say you're retired. Victoria's parents are really traditional about women in business, especially manufacturing. It's kind of blue collar, you know? Blue Collar. The company that was worth $2.4 million was blue collar and something to be ashamed of. Sure, David, I said quietly. I'll say I'm retired.
The weeks leading up to the dinner were strange. David called more frequently than he had in years, but only to give me instructions. Get my hair done at a proper salon, not Supercuts. Buy a dress from Nordstrom, not Macy's. Wear understated jewelry. Don't talk too much. Let Victoria's parents lead the conversation. Don't mention anything about my past that might seem lower class. Each phone call felt like another small cut, but I took it all. I made an appointment at an expensive salon. I bought a navy blue dress that cost $400, more than I'd spent on clothing in the past 2 years combined. I got my nails done. I practiced being quiet, demure, forgettable. My neighbor, Patricia, noticed the change. She lived next door for 15 years, and we'd become close friends. She found me sitting on my porch one evening, looking at the dress receipt, and asked what was wrong. My son is ashamed of me, I told her simply. Oh, Margaret, she said, sitting down beside me, that can't be true. So I told her everything. The phone calls, the instructions, the way David had said, from poverty, like it was a disease. Patricia listened, her face growing more and more troubled. Margaret, she said finally, you know what you need to do, right? What's that? You need to show them exactly who you are. I shook my head. I can't. David needs this. These connections, this marriage, it means everything to him. And you mean nothing? Patricia asked sharply. After everything you've done, after building that company from nothing, after raising him alone, you're going to pretend to be less than you are so he can impress some snobs? He's my son, I whispered. And you're his mother. You deserve his respect. She squeezed my hand. At least think about it. But I didn't think about it. I pushed the conversation out of my mind. I focused on the dinner, on making David proud, on being the small, quiet, invisible mother he apparently needed me to be. The dinner was scheduled for a Saturday evening at the Sterling family home in Connecticut. David had sent me the address, a mansion in Greenwich, because of course it was. He'd arranged for a car service to pick me up, which I appreciated. At least I wouldn't have to drive the embarrassing Honda. The day of the dinner, I got ready carefully. Hair in a neat bun, the way the salon had styled it, the navy blue dress, modest and expensive, small pearl earrings that had been my mother's. I looked in the mirror and barely recognized myself. I looked like someone trying to disappear. The car arrived at 5 o'clock. It was an hour and a half drive to Greenwich. I spent the entire ride trying to calm my nerves, rehearsing neutral topics of conversation in my head, the weather, gardening, books. Nothing controversial, nothing that would embarrass David. The Sterling mansion was exactly what I expected. Huge, white, with columns and a circular driveway, the kind of house that screamed old money. As the car pulled up, I saw David waiting on the front steps. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than my dress. When he saw me, he hurried down to the car. "Mom, hi," he said, opening my door. He looked at me up and down, and I saw him relax slightly. "You look great. Really appropriate." Appropriate. Not beautiful, not lovely. Appropriate. "Thanks, honey," I said, forcing a smile. Okay, so quick reminder, Victoria's father is Richard Sterling. Her mother is Catherine. They're going to ask polite questions, just give polite answers. Brief, don't elaborate too much. And remember, you're retired. You live simply by choice. And we had a comfortable middle-class upbringing. Got it? Got it, I said quietly. He nodded and led me to the front door. It opened before we reached it, and there was Victoria. She was pretty, blonde, thin, with the kind of polished look that comes from expensive salons and personal trainers. She smiled at me, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. "Mrs. Chen, so lovely to finally meet you," she said, extending a hand that barely touched mine. I doubted that very much. "It's wonderful to meet you too, Victoria. And please, call me Margaret." "Of course. Come in, come in. Mother and father are in the sitting room." The inside of the house was even more ostentatious than the outside. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, artwork that was probably worth more than most people's houses. Victoria led us through hallways that seemed to go on forever, until we reached a room where two people sat on cream-colored sofas. Richard Sterling was tall, silver-haired, with the kind of confident posture that comes from never having to doubt your place in the world. Catherine Sterling was elegant in a cold way. Perfectly coiffed hair, designer dress, jewelry that caught the light with every movement. "Mother, father, this is Margaret Chen, David's mother," Victoria said. They both stood, and Richard extended his hand. His handshake was firm, assessing. "Margaret, a pleasure. David has been rather mysterious about his family. We're glad to finally meet you."
"The pleasure is mine," I said, falling easily into the polite script I had rehearsed. "Please, sit," Catherine said, gesturing to a chair. "Can we get you something to drink? Wine, cocktail?" "Just water, thank you." We settled into that painful kind of small talk that happens when strangers are evaluating each other. Catherine asked about my drive, Richard mentioned the weather. Victoria sat close to David, her hand on his knee, both of them looking slightly tense. Then Richard leaned back and said, "So, Margaret, David tells us you're retired. What did you do before retirement?" I saw David's eyes flash a warning at me. This was my cue to be vague, forgettable. "I worked in manufacturing," I said simply. "Oh, what kind of manufacturing?" Catherine asked, her tone politely curious but dismissive. "Industrial parts. Precision components mostly." "How interesting," she said, in a tone that meant it was anything but. "That must have been quite different from what we're used to.
Richard runs Sterling Enterprises. Perhaps you've heard of it. I paused. Sterling Enterprises. The name was familiar, tickling at the edges of my memory. Where did I know that from? I'm not sure, I admitted. We're one of the largest distributors of industrial manufacturing supplies on the East Coast, Richard said with obvious pride. We work with all the major manufacturers. $42 million in revenue last year. Been in business for 25 years. I started it from scratch. And suddenly, I knew exactly where I'd heard that name. Sterling Enterprises. They weren't just a client of Chen Precision Industries. They were one of our biggest clients. In fact, we just signed a new 5-year contract with them last quarter worth $8.7 million. But more than that, Richard Sterling didn't start that company from scratch. I knew the actual history because I'd done my due diligence before signing the contract. Sterling Enterprises had been founded by Richard's father-in-law, Arthur Pemberton, back in 1982. When Pemberton retired in 2000, he'd essentially given the company to Richard, who'd married Hathran's daughter. Richard had taken over a thriving business and simply put his name on it. I sat there, processing this information, as Richard continued talking about his company's success, about the empire he'd built, about how he'd revolutionized the industry. He was saying, "We work with only the best manufacturers. Quality is our hallmark. We have very high standards for our partners. Can't work with just anyone, you understand." "Of course," I murmured. David was relaxing now, probably thinking the dangerous moment had passed. Victoria was smiling, her hand still on David's knee. Catherine was looking at me with that polite condescension that wealthy people perfect. "And you, Margaret, where do you live?" David mentioned you're still in Ohio. "Yes, I have a small house there." "How quaint," she said. "We have 3 homes, here in Greenwich, one in Manhattan, and our summer house in the Hamptons. But I suppose when you're retired and living simply, one house is quite sufficient." The condescension was breathtaking. Here I was being talked down to by people who had no idea that their company's biggest accounts payable line item had my name on it. "It suits my needs," I said evenly. "Well, we all have different standards of comfort," Richard said with a slight smile. "The important thing is that David has done well for himself. Good education, good career, and now marrying into a family that can open doors for him. Connections matter in business, Margaret. It's not just about working hard, it's about knowing the right people." Something in his tone, the casual dismissiveness, the implication that David had risen above his origins, made something inside me shift. "That's certainly one perspective," I said quietly. David shot me a look that clearly said, "Don't elaborate." But Richard wasn't done. He leaned forward, his expression taking on that fake friendly look that powerful people use when they're about to deliver an insult disguised as wisdom. "You know, Margaret, I respect people who work with their hands. Manufacturing, service industries, that sort of thing. Backbone of America, really. But let's be honest. There's a difference between labor and leadership. David has leadership potential. I can see that. With the right guidance, the right connections," he smiled at Victoria, "the right family support, he could really become something." "He already is something," I said, my voice still quiet but with an edge now. Of course," he said quickly. "I just mean he can reach his full potential. You did your best raising him, I'm sure. Single mother, working in a factory. That must have been incredibly hard. But now he has the opportunity to really elevate his station in life." Factory. He called my company a factory. And the casual cruelty of "you did your best," as if my best was some pathetic, insufficient thing, it was too much. I looked at David, my son, the boy I'd given everything for. He was staring at his hands, his face red, saying nothing. not defending me, not correcting Richard's assumptions, just sitting there, embarrassed by my existence. "David," I said softly, "do you agree with that assessment?" He looked up, panic in his eyes. "Mom, I don't think this is—" "Do you think I did my best and it just wasn't quite enough?" "Margaret, I don't think David meant—" "I'm asking my son," I said, keeping my eyes on David. "Do you think I just did my best in my little factory job, and now you need the Sterlings to elevate you to something better?" The room went silent. David's mouth opened and closed. That's not— You're taking this the wrong way." "Then explain to me the right way to take it," I said. My heart was pounding. Years of swallowing hurt, years of making myself small, years of accommodating everyone else. It was all bubbling up inside me. "Mrs. Chen," Catherine said, her voice icy, "I think you're being rather dramatic. Richard simply meant that David is marrying up, socially speaking. There's no shame in that. You should be happy for him." "Marrying up," I repeated. "From what, exactly?" "From a modest background," Richard said, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Look, I don't mean to be indelicate, but facts are facts. You worked in manufacturing. You raised David on a limited income. He went to a state school, not an Ivy. Now he has the chance to join a family with real wealth, real influence. You should be grateful we're welcoming him." "Grateful," I said slowly. The word tasted bitter. "Mom, please," David said, his voice almost begging, "can we just have a nice dinner?" I looked at him, really looked at him. When had he become this person? When had he learned to be ashamed of where he came from? Or had I done this? Had I made myself too small, too humble, too invisible, and taught him that's what we were? "David," I said, "tell them what I do." "You're retired, we established that," he started. "Tell them what I did before I retired. Tell them the name of the company." His face went pale. "Mom, that's not—" "Chen Precision Industries," I said, turning to Richard and Catherine. "That's the company I worked for. Except I didn't just work for it. I built it. From nothing. In 1979, my husband and I founded that company with $8,000 in savings and a dream. When he died in 1995, I took over as CEO. I've run it for 30 years. The silence in the room was deafening. "Chen Precision Industries," Richard repeated slowly. His face was changing, color draining away. "That Chen Precision?" "The one and only," I said, coldly. "The company your business buys $8.7 million worth of parts every year. The company whose contract renewal you just signed last quarter. Yes, that Chen Precision Industries." Catherine's hand went to her throat. Victoria looked confused. David looked like he might be sick. You're Margaret Chen," Richard said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I am," I confirmed. "The company is valued at $2.4 million. We employ 93 people. Our annual revenue is $58 million. I've been on the board of the National Manufacturing Association for 6 years. I've won the Ohio Businesswoman of the Year award twice. But please, continue telling me about the factory I worked in and how my son is marrying up." The look on Richard's face was something I'll remember for the rest of my life. It went from confusion to shock to horror to calculation, all in about 10 seconds. Catherine had gone completely white. Victoria's mouth was literally hanging open. But David looked destroyed. You knew," I said to him. "You knew what I'd built. You knew what that company was worth. You knew, and you told these people I was too poor, too lower class, too embarrassing to acknowledge. Mom, I just thought—" "You thought what?"
That you'd pretend your mother was some poor retired factory worker so you could fit in better with your new rich family? You were ashamed of me, of everything I accomplished, everything I built for you. Mrs. Chen, Richard started, his tone completely different now, placating, almost fearful. I apologize if there was any misunderstanding. Had I known I had money, you would have treated me with respect. I interrupted, coldly. But because you thought I was poor, it was fine to patronize me, to talk down to me, to suggest my son needed to escape his origins? He opened his mouth and closed it again. There was no good answer to that question. I stood up. My legs were shaking, but I stood up. I need to tell you all something. About your company, Richard, Sterling Enterprises. You told me you built it from scratch. That's not true, is it? Your father-in-law, Arthur Pemberton, built that company. He gave it to you when he retired because you married his daughter. You inherited a thriving business and took credit for its success. Richard's face flushed red. How dare you?
I dare because I do my homework. Before signing any major contract, I investigate my business partners thoroughly. I know Sterling Enterprises' complete history. I know that your revenue has actually declined 15% since you took over. I know that you've been skating by on the relationships Pemberton built. And I know, I paused for effect, that Chen Precision Industries represents 38% of your total revenue. Lose us, and your company's financials fall apart. The silence was absolute. Catherine looked like she might faint. Richard's face had gone from red to purple. "Are you threatening me?" he said, his voice shaking with rage. "No," I said calmly, firmly. "I'm telling you facts, the same way you told me facts about working with your hands versus leadership, about marrying up, about doing one's best even when it's not quite enough. I'm just being honest, the way you were." "Margaret, please," David said, standing up, his voice breaking. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I never meant. I didn't think." "No, you didn't think," I agreed, sadly. "You didn't think about how it would feel for me to hear my own son describe me as too poor to meet his fiancé's family. You didn't think about the fact that I gave you everything, every opportunity, every advantage. I paid for your college, all 4 years, $140,000 total. I gave you money whenever you asked, never expecting repayment. I set up a trust that would make you the majority owner of a multi-million-dollar company when I die, and you repaid me by being ashamed of where you came from." Tears were running down David's face now. "Mom, I was stupid. I was trying to impress them. I wanted to fit in. You wanted to erase me," I said quietly. "You wanted to pretend you came from somewhere else, someone else, because the truth, a mother who worked in manufacturing, who lived simply, who didn't have the right kind of wealth, embarrassed you." "That's not true," he said desperately. "Isn't it? Then why did you tell me not to mention my work? Why did you tell me to say I was retired? Why did you call Chen Precision Industries blue collar and something to be ashamed of? Why did you coach me to be small and quiet and forgettable?" He had no answer. I turned back to Richard and Catherine. "You raised your daughter to value money and status above character, to judge people by their bank accounts and their addresses. And you," I looked at Victoria, who was still sitting there in shock, "you went along with David's lies about his background. Did you ask about me? Did you want to know who I was? Or were you just fine with the idea of a poor, simple mother-in-law you could patronize?" Victoria's face crumbled. "I didn't. David said you preferred privacy, that you didn't like to talk about yourself." "How convenient," I said, sarcastically. I picked up my purse. My hands were steadier now. The shaking had stopped, replaced by a cold, clear certainty. "I'm leaving," I announced. "David, I love you. I'll always love you. But I will not be disrespected. Not by you, not by anyone. When you're ready to have an honest conversation about why you did this, about what it says about the man you've become, call me. Until then, I need some distance. Mom, please don't go, David said, reaching for my arm. I stepped back. I'm going. You can stay here with your new family, the one you're not ashamed of. I walked out of that sitting room with my head high, through those ostentatious hallways, past the crystal and marble, and all the trappings of wealth that Richard Sterling thought made him better than people like me. The front door felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, but I pushed it open. Outside, the evening air was cool and clean. I called the car service and they said they'd return in 15 minutes. I stood on the steps of that mansion, breathing deeply, feeling like I'd just fought a battle. Behind me, I heard the door open. I didn't turn around. Mrs. Chen. Margaret. Please wait. Why? I asked, still not turning around. I need to apologize properly. What I said in there, it was inexcusable. I made assumptions. Terrible assumptions. And I was wrong. I turned to face him. He looked smaller somehow, standing there in his expensive suit. You were wrong about me. But your attitude, that was real. That's how you really feel about people you perceive as beneath you. Then he stopped. You're right. You're absolutely right. And I'm sorry. Not because your company is important to my business, though it is, but because you deserved respect regardless of who you are or what you do. I failed at basic human decency. It was probably the most honest thing he'd said all evening. Your apology is noted, I said coldly, but it doesn't fix what happened in there, and it doesn't fix what my son did. He's inside, he said quietly, sobbing. Victoria is trying to comfort him, but he trailed off. But, I prompted. But I think she's realizing what kind of person she's marrying. Someone who would betray his own mother to make an impression. I almost felt sorry for David then. Almost. The car pulled up and I started down the steps. Margaret, Richard called after me. Our contract with Chen Precision. I hope this doesn't... I turned back one more time. Our contract stands. I'm a professional. I honor my agreements. But I'll be appointing a new account manager for Sterling Enterprises. I won't be dealing with you personally anymore. He nodded, looking relieved and humiliated in equal measure. I got into the car and didn't look back as we drove away from that house, away from my son's tears, away from the wreckage of the evening. The drive home was long. I called Patricia from the car, told her everything. She listened, occasionally gasping or swearing on my behalf, and when I finished, she said simply, "I'm proud of you." Those words made me cry, really cry, for the first time that whole evening, because I'd stood up for myself. Finally, after a lifetime of being accommodating and humble and small, I'd stood up and said, no, I deserve respect. When I got home, I was exhausted, emotionally, physically, completely drained. I went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the evening, David's face when I exposed the truth, Richard's casual cruelty, my own voice saying words I'd held back for so long. My phone rang at 2 a.m. It was David. I let it go to voicemail. He called again at 2:30, again at 3. Each time I let it ring. In the morning, I listened to the voicemails. His voice was raw, broken. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't know what I was thinking. I was an idiot. I was cruel. Please talk to me. I love you. I'm sorry." On and on, variations of the same thing. But apologies are just words. They don't erase actions. They don't undo hurt. Over the next week, David called me 17 times. He sent flowers, expensive ones from some fancy florist. He sent a letter, handwritten, 6 pages of apologies and explanations. He'd been caught up in Victoria's world, he said. He'd wanted so badly to fit in. He'd made terrible choices. He knew he'd hurt me. He knew he'd betrayed my trust. Could he ever forgive me? I didn't respond to any of it. I went to work, I managed my company, I had dinner with Patricia, I lived my life. But there was a hole in my chest where my relationship with my son had been. Patricia thought I should talk to him. She said, "He's your son. He made a mistake, a big one, but people make mistakes." I corrected her. He wasn't mistaken. He made a choice, multiple choices. He chose to be ashamed of me. He chose to lie about our life. He chose his own social climbing over his mother's dignity. And now he's chosen to apologize, Patricia pointed out. Because he got caught, I said. Better. Because I exposed him in front of his future in-laws. If I'd stayed quiet, played along, let them think I was some poor retired worker, he would have been perfectly happy with that. He's not sorry he did it. He's sorry it blew up in his face. Patricia couldn't argue with that logic. 2 weeks after the dinner, I got a call from Victoria. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Mrs. Chen," she said, her voice small, "I hope it's okay that I'm calling. I got your number from David." "It's fine," I said neutrally. I wanted to apologize for my part in everything. I believed what David told me about his background, but I should have asked more questions. I should have wanted to know you better, regardless of what I thought your circumstances were. That was wrong. Yes, I agreed simply. It was. And I need to tell you something else. I called off the engagement. That surprised me. You did? Yes. After that dinner, I couldn't stop thinking about what kind of person David must be. To treat his own mother that way, to lie about her, to be ashamed of her. And then I started noticing other things, small lies, little exaggerations. The way he talks about people he thinks are beneath him. I realized I actually didn't know who I was marrying. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. Not sorry the engagement was off, but sorry she had to learn that lesson this way. "Don't be. You did me a favor, a huge favor. You showed me the truth before I made a terrible mistake. And Mrs. Chen, for what it's worth, the way you stood up for yourself that night, that was the bravest thing I've ever seen. I aspired to have half your backbone." After we hung up, I sat with that for a while. The engagement was off. My son had lost the future he'd been planning, the connections he'd been courting, all because of his own choices. I felt a complicated mix of satisfaction and sadness. David called that evening, right after Victoria must have told him. He was crying so hard I could barely understand him. "Mom, she left me. She broke up with me. She said I'm not the person I thought I was. She said what you did to me was unforgivable." "Is it?" I asked. "Unforgivable?"
"I don't know," he said honestly. "I don't know if what I did can be forgiven, but I'm asking anyway. I'm begging. I need my mom. I need you to tell me I'm not a terrible person. I need you to tell me I can come back from this." And here's the thing about being a mother. Even when your child has hurt you worse than anyone else ever could, there's a part of you that wants to comfort them, wants to make their pain go away. But I'd spent too many years making myself small for other people's comfort. "David," I said carefully, "I love you. I'll always love you. you're my son. But I can't tell you you're not a terrible person when you're acting like a terrible person. And I can't just erase what you did with easy forgiveness. Then what do I do? He asked desperately. You figure out who you want to be. The kind of man who's ashamed of his mother's blue-collar roots? The kind of man who lies and manipulates to climb socially? Or the kind of man who honors where he came from and treats all people with respect, regardless of their bank account? I want to be better, he said, trembling voice. I want to be the man you raised me to be. I don't know when I lost that, but I want it back. Then start working on it, I said, firmly. Not for me, not to win me back, but because it's right. Go to therapy. Examine your values. Figure out what matters to you. Is it wealth and status and impressing people like the Sterlings? Or is it character and integrity and genuine human connection? Can I call you? He asked. While I'm working on this? Can I update you? I thought about that. Once a month. You can call me once a month and tell me how you're doing. But David, I need you to understand, our relationship has changed. You broke something when you chose to be ashamed of me. Trust, respect, the easy, unconditional love between a mother and child. It can be rebuilt, maybe, but it's going to take time. A lot of time. I understand, he said quietly. And Mom, thank you for not cutting me off completely, for giving me a chance. I'm giving you a chance to grow, I corrected, not a chance to go back to the way things were. That's gone. We hung up and I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the first tiny seed of it. The months that followed were strange. David called once a month, like clockwork. He started seeing a therapist who specialized in family dynamics and personal values. He quit his finance job, the one he'd taken partly to impress people, and started working for a nonprofit that helped fund small businesses in underserved communities. He sent me articles he'd read about class, privilege, and unconscious bias. He sent me updates on his progress, never asking for praise or forgiveness, just sharing his journey. Meanwhile, Richard Starling sent me a formal letter of apology, along with a large donation to a scholarship fund I'd established for children of manufacturing workers. Catherine sent flowers every month for 6 months with notes that said simply, "We're sorry." I acknowledged their gestures but maintained my professional distance. They'd shown me who they were. I believed them. Victoria, surprisingly, stayed in touch. We had coffee a few times. She'd started her own business, something her parents disapproved of, and she asked my advice. We became something like friends, bonded by our shared experience of that disastrous dinner. At work, Chang Precision Industries continued thriving. I promoted one of my senior managers to handle the Sterling Enterprises account, as I'd promised. The company launched a new product line. We hired 15 more employees. I felt proud of what I built in a way I maybe hadn't fully felt before, because now I defended myself. A year after that dinner, David called on his monthly check-in day. "Mom," he said, "I have something to tell you. I've been offered a job with a small manufacturing company in Ohio. It's entry level, basically. I'd be learning the business from the ground up, and I was thinking maybe I could move closer to you. Not because I expect us to have the relationship we used to have, but because I want to understand where I came from. I want to learn what you learned. I want to see if I can build something with my own hands the way you did." I was quiet for a long moment. "What about your life in New York?" I asked quickly. "I don't have much of a life here anymore," he admitted. "After Victoria and I broke up, after I quit the finance job, I've been floating. I've been doing the work in therapy, examining my values, but I haven't been living them. This job, it's a chance to do that, to actually live differently. And you want to be near me?" I asked carefully. "I want the chance to rebuild our relationship," he said quietly. "Even if it takes years, even if we never get back what we had, I want to try. I want to prove to you that I'm not the person I was at that dinner, that I can be better." Part of me wanted to say yes immediately.
Part of me wanted to protect myself from potential more hurt. Take the job, I said finally. Move to Ohio. But David, I meant what I said about taking time. We'll have dinner once a month. We'll rebuild slowly. And I need you to understand, you're not moving here to be taken care of. You're not moving here to slide back into being my son who I do everything for. You're moving here as an adult who has to earn back trust. I understand, he said. Thank you, Mom. Thank you for not giving up on me completely. I'm your mother, I said simply. That's not something I can give up on even when I want to. David moved to Ohio 3 months later. He took the entry-level job. He rented a small apartment. We had our monthly dinners, awkward at first, slowly becoming easier. We didn't talk about that dinner for a long time. We talked about his work, my work, books we were reading, movies we'd seen, safe topics. But slowly, over months and then years, something shifted. He showed me through his actions that he'd changed. He worked hard at his manufacturing job, learning every aspect of the business. He volunteered with community organizations. He talked about his therapy insights, about unlearning classism and materialism and the toxic values he'd absorbed. 2 years after the dinner, we were having one of our monthly meals when he said, I want to talk about it, about that night, about what I did. Is that okay? I set down my fork. Okay. I've been thinking a lot about why I did what I did. And I realize now that it wasn't really about being ashamed of you. It was about being ashamed of myself. I'd built this identity in New York as someone who came from nothing and made something of himself, the self-made man. But it was all a lie. I didn't come from nothing. I came from you, from someone who actually did build something from scratch. And I think, on some level, I resented that because it meant I wasn't special. I was just the son of someone extraordinary. I hadn't expected that level of insight. He continued, so I rewrote the story, made you smaller so I could feel bigger, made our life sound harder than it was so my accomplishments seemed more impressive. And then when Victoria's parents turned out to be wealthy and connected, I doubled down. I thought if I could erase my real history and replace it with a more suitable narrative, I could become the person I'd been pretending to be. But you destroyed the real person in the process. Me. I destroyed both of us, he agreed, sadly. The real you and the real me. And I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so deeply, profoundly sorry. I looked at my son across the table. He was 38 now, and he looked different than he had 2 years ago. Less polished, more real. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. His hands were rough from actual work. He'd changed, truly changed. I forgive you, I said, and I meant it. He started crying, not the desperate, manipulative crying of someone trying to get what they want, but the clean, honest tears of someone who's finally released a burden they'd been carrying too long. We finished dinner mostly in silence, but it was a comfortable silence. Afterward, walking to our cars, he said, I know we'll probably never have what we had before. I know I broke something irreplaceable, but thank you for letting me try. David, I said, stopping him with a hand on his arm, we won't have what we had before, but maybe we can build something new, something stronger, because it's built on honesty instead of assumptions. He hugged me then, and I hugged him back, and for the first time in 2 years, it felt like my son was really there. Now, 5 years after that dinner, I can tell you where everyone is. Richard Sterling retired early, pushed out by his own board after years of declining performance. Catherine divorced him shortly after, tired of covering for his inadequacies. Sterling Enterprises was sold to a larger conglomerate. Victoria runs a successful consulting business, helping companies improve their workplace culture. We still get coffee every few months. David is now a floor manager at the manufacturing company where he started as an entry-level worker. He's engaged to a woman named Sarah, who's a public school teacher. They're getting married next spring in a simple ceremony. She knows everything about our history, about the dinner, about David's journey back to himself, and she loves him for who he is now, not who he was pretending to be. As for me, I'm still running Chen Precision Industries. I'm 73 years old now, and I have no plans to retire anytime soon. The company is thriving, my employees are well cared for, and I've started a foundation that provides business training and seed funding for women in manufacturing. I also stopped making myself small. I speak up when something bothers me. I don't accommodate people at my own expense. I demand respect from everyone, including my son. It took me 70 years to learn that lesson, but I learned it. Sometimes people ask me if I regret what happened that night, if I wish I'd stayed quiet, kept the peace, preserved my relationship with David the way it was. And I tell them no, because that relationship was built on a lie. The lie that I was less important than his comfort, less valuable than his ambitions, less deserving of respect than people with the right kind of wealth. That dinner broke the lie and forced us both to face the truth. The truth hurt. The truth cost us years of easy relationship. But the truth also set us free. Me to stand up for myself, and David to examine who he really wanted to be. Was it worth it? Yes, 1,000 times yes. Because I'd rather have an honest, hard-won relationship built on mutual respect than a comfortable lie where I shrink myself to make others feel big. My name is Margaret Chen. I'm 73 years old. I built a multi-million-dollar company from scratch. I survived betrayal from the person I loved most. And I learned that respect, real respect, starts with respecting yourself. If you liked my story, please leave a comment below. Tell me about a time you stood up for yourself, or a time you wish you had. Share this with someone who needs to hear that they deserve respect. And remember, it's never too late to stop making yourself small. You are worthy of dignity, no matter what anyone else thinks.